This is Finland, a nation of over 5.6 million people that was once seen as the most welcoming Nordic country. Consistently ranking as the happiest country in the world, Finland has been hailed as a land of peace. In fact, in 2020, it managed to gain 7 positions and land in the 4th spot of the Global Peace Report. Yet, by 2024, most indicators of peacefulness have disappeared, and it's only getting worse. So what's changed? As of 2025, despite facing significant backlash from human rights groups and criticism from world leaders, Finland is doubling down on its strict stance towards immigration. In a move that has shocked most of Europe, Finland is shutting its borders, rewriting asylum laws, and turning away migrants at unprecedented rates. With the stated goal of achieving Europe's strictest immigration laws, Finland is positioning itself at the forefront of a growing trend towards exclusionary policies. But why? Just why is one of Europe's most admired nations suddenly declaring war on immigration? As the country tightens its grip and continues to shift its ways, right-wing politicians are gaining power, and asylum seekers are finding fewer and fewer ways in. And the effect is now rubbing off on other countries as well. Finland's approach appears to be influencing other nations, particularly Poland, which has enacted its own controversial asylum law in the wake of Finland's huge transition. Prime Minister Petteri Orpo has accused Moscow of undermining his country's national security and trying to create a migrant crisis after Finland joined NATO earlier this year. More than 500 asylum seekers, mostly from Yemen, Somalia, Syria, and Iraq, have crossed the border into Finland in the last 2 weeks. Finland is accusing Russia of a cruel practice of bringing desperate, underdressed migrants from the Middle East to the Arctic, after Finland announced it was closing its 4 busiest southeastern border crossings with Russia. Located in northern Europe, Finland's immigration patterns are heavily influenced by its geography. Finland's international border with Russia is among the longest in the world, an astounding 1,340 kilometers, 830 miles in length from north to south. This extensive border presents many opportunities as well as numerous challenges for Finland in terms of immigration and border control. Alongside this, the geographic proximity to Russia has historically opened doors to multiple migration trends shaped by shifting geopolitical power struggles and regional violence. Additionally, Finland's position as a border between Eastern and Western Europe makes immigration policies more complicated. It creates a mix of different policy goals, shaped by debates over security, border control, national identity, humanitarian issues, and cultural preservation. And speaking of protecting what's yours, whether it's your national borders or your personal information, you need someone on your side. Hey, my name is Trace. I don't look too familiar because I'm behind the scenes here across the globe. Lately, it seems that data privacy is a really hard thing to come by. Every single day, I am bombarded by text messages by some recruiter trying to tell me they have a job for me, or calls from someone trying to sell me an extended warranty. Data brokers have sold your personal information. These data brokers buy and sell your information, and in the wrong hands can be something much, much worse than an annoying text, call, or email. And it doesn't have to be this way because there is a solution. All this brings me to today's sponsor, Incognito. It's so wild to me that there's companies out there that exist solely to bombard you with garbage. In a game of numbers, you have a right to data privacy. Incognito makes it incredibly easy to access data brokers and other entities that trade in your personal information and have it removed. Here's how it works. You sign up for Incognito and give them consent to act on your behalf. They immediately go to work searching the internet for these data lists that contain your information and demand that the information be removed. If these data brokers push back, Incognito will continue to push them until your information is completely removed. If you want to be free from spam once and for all, use code across the globe at the link below to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incognito plan and start your journey to a freedom you haven't known for a long time. Now, back to the video. Finland has long been seen as a high-trust society characterized by its generous welfare system and small population, which together creates a sense of community and social cohesion. Historically, immigration numbers in Finland have been quite low, resulting in a relatively homogeneous population. This demographic shift cultivated public tolerance. as the strong social safety net created an environment where citizens felt secure in their livelihoods and futures. Until recently, immigration was not a dominant issue in Finnish politics or society. It was largely overshadowed by other concerns such as economic stability and Finnish identity. The country's migratory history was primarily defined by immigration rather than immigration until the 1990s, but since then, immigration has significantly increased, particularly from Estonia, the Russian Federation, and Somalia. Post-1990s, the number of immigrants increased considerably, driven by factors such as the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise in refugee flows, and the implementation of policies encouraging the return of people of Finnish descent from Ingria. As the 2010s approached, things began to spiral, and the rising debate on immigration started to challenge Finland's long-standing tradition of acceptance and inclusivity. So when did everything change, and what went so wrong? The turning point in Finland's view on immigration came after a sharp increase in asylum seekers during the 2015-2016 European refugee crisis, which saw an influx of migrants seeking safety from conflict and persecution. In 2015 alone, Finland received 32,476 asylum applications, an unprecedented number of applications 10 times higher than any of the previous 30 years. This sudden rise in newcomers coincided with a noticeable increase in violent crimes, particularly those involving migrants, which were extensively covered by the media. A 2015 study found that immigrant youth had higher incidence rates in 14 out of 17 delinquent acts. In 2016, there were reports of increased crime by refugees, asylum seekers, and illegal immigrants in Finland, specifically a 50% increase in the number of suspected crimes by these groups. Additionally, incidents of violence against asylum seekers centers were reported, and some were attributed to other asylum seekers. Some parents had to wait for 3 hours before they were able to collect their children. Samuela Ano's son was in the school when the shooting happened. The extensive media coverage of these events fueled public fear and anxiety around immigration, shifting the national conversation from humanitarian support to concerns about security and social unity. As these fears spread, political leaders took notice and began to use them to their advantage, pushing for stricter immigration policies and stronger national security measures. Rhetoric around immigration began to shift dramatically, with statements such as, "This is no longer about helping, it's about survival," reflecting a pervasive belief that immigration was no longer a matter of compassion, but rather a fundamental threat to Finland. As public opinion on immigration has shifted, Finnish politics has adapted, paving the way for the rise of the right-wing Finns party as a significant force in the political scene. The 2023 elections brought a significant surge for right-wing factions, positioning immigration as a central talking point that resonated deeply with increasingly concerned voters. As reported by Reuters, Finland's Nationalist Finns party leader, Riikka Purra, came out swinging with the bold statement that she would crack down on immigration immediately if her party won the national election. Purra scored a historic triumph, earning more votes than any woman candidate in 75 years, and is now Deputy Prime Minister of Finland, while the Finns party finished in second place with 46 seats, recording their strongest results since its founding. Purra's stance on immigration has lived on. This change has resulted in a government coalition that's much tougher on immigration than in the past, reflecting growing public concern. Politicians in this group have used slogans like "Finland is for Finns" and "Enough is enough" to show how strongly they feel about the issue. This new political environment shows a clear change in priorities, where the emphasis is placed on preserving national identity and security over the once prominent discourse of inclusion and support for migrants. As political leaders harness this wave of nationalism, the implications for Finland's immigration policy and society as a whole are profound, moving the country into uncharted territory with potentially lasting consequences. So what has happened in the wake of such a policy shift? How strict have things gotten in Finland? Finland has implemented a series of measures that signal a clear move towards stricter asylum regulations. One of the most significant changes has been the introduction of more rigorous asylum rules. making it increasingly difficult for prospective refugees to gain entry into the country. This includes heightened investigation of applications with a focus on ensuring that only those meeting strict criteria are granted asylum. Scuffles erupted at one of Finland's border crossings with Russia on Friday after 163 migrants riding bicycles attempted to seek asylum there. Helsinki wants to stop a recent flow of Middle Eastern and African migrants to its border, which it says Moscow is encouraging. On July 12, 2024, the Finnish parliament adopted a new law that allows border guards to push back individuals attempting to cross the country's border with Russia without first allowing them to apply for asylum. This controversial legislation, known as the Act on Temporary Measures to Combat Instrumentalized Migration, garnered approval from 167 MPs, with only 31 voting against it. Speaking after the vote, Prime Minister Petteri Orpo emphasized the rationale behind the law, stating, "Since the end of last year, we have seen Russia deliberately using migrants as an instrument of hybrid influence against our security, against our borders." He further noted, "Today the parliament has approved the law by a clear majority, highlighting the political consensus regarding the perceived threat that migration poses in the context of national security." In addition, the government has increased the deportation of refugees whose applications have been denied, even in cases where individuals come from active conflict zones. This policy raises significant ethical questions and underscores the drastic shift away from the previous commitment to uphold asylum seekers' rights. Alongside these measures, there have been substantial cutbacks on integration programs and financial support for migrants already residing in the country. Such reductions will likely hinder the ability of newcomers to assimilate and contribute to Finnish society, effectively sending a message that the government is less inclined to invest in their future. As Finland continues to implement its hardline immigration policies, it is raising questions about the broader implications for global migration trends and whether it has drawn inspiration from countries like Denmark, which has adopted a notably strict approach in recent years. Denmark's stated goal of reducing asylum applications to zero illustrates a profound shift in perspective, mirroring the feelings now echoed in Finland's own policy changes. In 2023, Denmark reported processing 2,563 asylum applications, while apprehending around 1,100 non-citizens, actions that reflect its commitment to limiting immigration within its borders. The alignment in policy between the two Nordic countries marks a growing trend across Europe toward more exclusionary practices. With Finland's recent legislation and Denmark's strict approach, are we seeing a coordinated effort among Scandinavian countries to strengthen their borders and simplify asylum processes? Finland's changing stance on immigration reflects a broader trend of migration fatigue across Europe, where many nations are grappling with the pressures of increasing numbers of migrants and the accompanying societal changes. In 2022, a study found that nearly half of all Finns actually consider immigration to be a culturally enriching phenomenon. However, more than 40% of people rejected the idea, and according to ETIAS, a 2024 survey taken in Finland showed that over 40% of immigrants face discrimination. The survey spoke with more than 7,800 adults who were born outside of Finland and found that 75% of people who felt discriminated against said it was because of their background, ethnicity, or hair color. And immigrants from African and Middle Eastern countries reported the highest levels of discrimination. As public apprehensions grow around the potential loss of national identity and fears of becoming overwhelmed by welfare burdens, these concerns have fueled the rise of populist parties across Europe. These parties often capitalize on the anxiety surrounding immigration, positioning themselves as champions of national interests and security. The result is a growing political environment where anti-immigration sentiment is gaining traction, threatening to reshape not only immigration policies, but also the core values of European societies that have long been proud of their commitment to inclusion and humanitarian principles. But are there any consequences of such moves? The shift towards stricter immigration policies in Finland carries profound costs, particularly in light of the country's demographic realities. With an aging population and a declining birth rate, Finland faces an urgent need for immigration to sustain its workforce. According to Migrants, Finland's aging society relies heavily on consistent immigration and foreign workers to maintain economic vitality. The nonprofit Economic Research Institute, ETLA, estimated that Finland requires a net migration of 44,000 people annually to stabilize the size of the birth cohorts and the labor force. However, with birth rates having dropped for the third consecutive year in 2024, reaching the lowest levels in the country's recorded history, the potential for a growing workforce is in jeopardy. As Finland grapples with these demographic challenges, there are growing concerns about the implications of its restrictive immigration policies, particularly regarding brain drain and labor shortages. In an environment where skilled workers are increasingly mobile, a heavy-handed approach could deter potential migrants who would otherwise contribute to the economy and also convince some native residents to move outside of the country. Finland experiences a significant amount of brain drain, where highly educated and skilled individuals, including many university graduates, are leaving the country for opportunities elsewhere. A 2023 survey found that nearly half of foreign students plan to leave Finland after graduating. Furthermore, this policy shift creates tensions within the European Union, as differing approaches to refugee policies emerge, leading to rifts between member states over responsibility sharing and humanitarian commitments. The public response to these developments has been mixed, creating a country increasingly divided on immigration issues. While some segments of the population support the government's hardline stance, advocating for national security and identity preservation, others express deep concerns over the long-term economic and social implications of such a restrictive approach. As of 2025, the Finnish government has announced plans to extend the controversial asylum law that has already faced scrutiny for its restrictive measures. Additionally, the Finnish Immigration Service will be closing 18 reception centers, further limiting the resources available to asylum seekers and underscoring the country's shift toward more stringent immigration policies. Compounding these developments, observers have noted that Finland's approach is starting to influence other nations. As we mentioned, Poland has enacted its own controversial asylum law. This new Polish legislation allows the government to temporarily suspend the rights of individuals entering the country irregularly via the border with Belarus to apply for asylum. As Finland fortifies its position against immigration, it raises questions about the broader implications for human rights and the collective European response to migration, potentially setting a precedent that could spread rapidly across the continent. So, as Finland navigates this huge shift in immigration policy, it is evident that it is not alone in its struggles. However, its sudden and pronounced pivot may serve as the loudest alarm yet in a Europe grappling with complex social and demographic challenges. The country's stern approach raises critical questions about the balance between national identity and the sustainability of its workforce. But in this battle between identity and sustainability, who ultimately wins? As Finland's policies unfold further, they not only impact the lives of asylum seekers and migrants, but also echo across the entire world, challenging the very core of European values and the future of its diverse societies. What about why no one wants to live in Sweden?